Welcome, everyone. My name is Parker Lacewell, and I am a sophomore communications and social justice major. This semester, I'm partnering with the Museum of the American Indian in Novato. Today, we will begin by acknowledging that Dominican University of California's campus is located on the ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok people, including Coast Miwok Tribal Council of Marin and Federated Indians of Grayton Rancherie. We recognize those who are federally recognized and those who are not. We acknowledge that the land this campus is on is only made possible because of the Indigenous people who came before us and were displaced as a result. It is important for us to acknowledge the Indigenous community, since the community on a regular basis has to deal with the problem of invisibility. Even in Marin race counts, Indigenous communities rarely appear as a category. So beyond being a marginalized community, the community is hardly even recognized and grouped as others. This grossly blatant form of oppression is unacceptable, and it is pertinent that we acknowledge the community that made it possible for us to be here today. We bring this to your attention to make you aware of the injustices that members of the Indigenous community have faced for us to be able to meet here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Parker. I'm George Faithful, here representing our social justice program, as well as the Wabash Center for Teaching and Learning in Religion and Theology, which is one of our co-sponsors, along with the Church of the Redeemer in San Rafael, an Episcopal Church that has helped support this valuable work in this speaker series, as well as the Museum of the American Indian in Novato, whose executive director, Tori Canby, I'd like to hand things over to. Go ahead, Tori.
Thanks, George, and thank you to all our partnerships. This is a wonderful series to be part of. This is the last of the Lunchtime talks, and I just, every time I'm just so thankful to be able to be in community with such wonderful people, and also to have the opportunity to collaborate with such wonderful folks to have these talks happen. And that includes me, working with Sara. She is a phenomenal human, creative being, educator, dancer, collaborating author and film producer. And she is also the CEO of the Cultural Conservancy. And that includes oversight and management of all the wonderful work they do at the farms at our IVC, as well as up in Heron Shadow up in Sebastopol. So Sara, wonderful to have you today here with us, and hand it over to you.
Oh, thanks, Tori. It's nice to see you, and I have a good excuse to play together too. I've been missing kind of hanging out with folks. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here today. Many blessings to each of you and all of the circles that you bring with you when you arrive. I know every day when we wake up, each one of us is a different human being because it's a new day. And every day we get up and we encounter the world through our experiences, and I very much acknowledge and welcome the authentic you that you are today as you arrive here. I have slides because it's a talk and we've got slides, so I'm going to walk you through a couple of things and then kind of open it up at the end to hopefully just very comfortable and warm dialogue. Let's see. Okay, I think I can share screen, and then I go like this. And hopefully I go like that, and then I hit that button. And if I did it right, you should see slides, right? Okay, cool. Right on. Thank you, everyone. So Tori's right. I wear a lot of hats in the world, but as of right now, and kind of the most authentic part of who I am today is I'm very much a part of a family called the Cultural Conservancy. We're a Native-led nonprofit organization that's been in business in the San Francisco Bay Area for a little over 35 years now. And our mission has been to really hold in well respect and consideration the circle that happens when we connect ancestral people with ancestral lands. That is the development and the birth of many things: our cultures, our languages, our stories, our foods, our relationships with the ecosystem. And that's ultimately the work of the Cultural Conservancy. But before I talk too much about that, it's important for me to disclose who I am, my position in the world, my positionality. as folks working in the academic arena, as you're learning, when we show up to share knowledge and share stories, it's important to know the voice of the person who's there to share that information, because that voice, that defining of who we are, it's important. It informs what we share. I come from Yaqui, Ome, and a little bit Apache ancestry on my father's side. And on my mother's side, kind of Irish, Scandinavian, and a beautiful mix of European on that side. And both of those systems inform who I am, both from my relationships to the arts, which I'm heavily involved in, but also my relationships to land, my relationships to family, my relationships to community. And as I get more involved in my work in community, the more that kind of knowing, that ancestral awareness starts to come alive in me. I've started to realize the more I'm in service to my community, the more my community is in service back. I am not enrolled, and that's an important place of distinction for us to honor and recognize in this current time frame. And we can talk a little bit more about that if you want. But I am officially a mixed race Indigenous woman who's not enrolled with her tribal nation. I'm a dancer. I'm a powwow dancer. You see there. I'm also just a crazy dancer. I started dancing when I was 4. And I'm classically trained for over 17 years in ballet. Modern, I took a round with Argentine tango and salsa in kind of my young 20s. That was really fun. I thought it was kind of letting loose a little bit. And then also landed in other cultural arts traditions like flamenco, which has been a very enriching part of my life. I remember very clearly the moment I landed in southern Spain and had this strange conflict of like, oh, but you're native and you're hanging out in Spain and you're studying flamenco, but then walked into an indigenous kind of gypsy community in Granada in the caves of southern Spain, and had an auntie look at me and share food with me and talk story and song with me in the same way that my aunties have back home with my father's family and my husband's family, and realized this connection that many of us have with our traditional songs and our arts as containers, as knowledge systems, as informative sciences when we come forward in who we are. I'm also a wife and a mom. That's my little munchkin there dancing with me. We did a tour in New Zealand. My husband and I are part of a cultural arts and education organization that was asked to tour in New Zealand to do Indigenous music and dance sharing. And we said, sure, as long as we can bring our munchkin. And they said yes. And it was incredible to walk into a cultural sharing circle, not only as adults, but with the eyes and the heart of a child. Because when it comes to our cultural arts, our children is who we dance for, and our children's children, and our children's children's children. And to bring that voice into that experience was an exceptionally enriching moment. You see that I've got tech going on in there, technology. I come from a very long background in the technology arena. When I left high school, I did not go immediately into college. I was here in the San Francisco Bay Area and got picked up in the .com swell boom of the early 2000s. And I spent much of my time on the job, getting my deep education in lived experience in healthcare technology, and spent quite some time in that arena, and in a sense kind of earned my MBA on the job. I am a recovering corporate-aholic for that, and have taken that knowledge system and that deep learning that I did for well over a decade and a half in that space, and brought that into my work in the nonprofit arena and my work in the community. And that's been a path that I'm not sure I would change. When I came back to my education later in my life, when I entered into the adult education completion, the complete adult, it's changed names now at Dominican University, it's hard to keep up, but you had an adult degree completion program once upon a time, and it was a really beautiful one. and one that I'm deeply enriched by myself. I finished my education after I left the corporate arena, and I was looking for something new to do, and came back to education via Dominican University's adult degree completion program, and that was one of the best decisions I ever made. I got my MA at Dominican as part of that in humanities and cultural studies, and a couple of the professors from that group I think are even on this call, so I hope I do a good job. When I finished my degree, actually as part of finishing my degree, I landed at the Cultural Conservancy. I played many roles in that organization. I've been there for about 7 years now. And it's true, over the last year and a half, I've gone through a succession process that has resulted in me being the new leader of this organization. And that has also been a deeply enriching moment in my life. I came to a moment where I realized I was a leader not because of ambition, but I was a leader because my community asked me to step up, and I answered that call. As part of my work, I'm also now on the board of the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone. This is a group that represents the first folks of the San Francisco Peninsula. When you cross that Golden Gate Bridge, you are square in Ramaytush Ohlone land. And the revitalization work and support work that we do there is very meaningful to me. And I'm also on the advisory council of the American Indian Cultural District in San Francisco. If you guys don't know this, San Francisco is the first city in the world to list an American Indian Cultural District. There's Japan towns and China towns and little Italies all over the United States. And yet, as First Peoples, there was never a metropolitan municipal cultural district that offers that kind of same support services to Indigenous people. San Francisco and Mayor London Breed just made the first one happen. So it's been a very interesting journey. And one, I think, even that, oh, oops, I clicked a button that probably was inappropriate. Let me see if I can find you guys. That was even brought up and mentioned to us in our beginning, in our beautiful opening land acknowledgement. You know, there was a deep recognition that even when we're looking at statistics in this country, that when we do things like decide who gets social services based on state and federal funding, that when you count people and racial numbers and boxes, those numbers and boxes matter. And they matter with everything from health and mental health and services to things like a cultural district that can be supportive in the moment of a global pandemic and rolling out services to their community. So this has been a wonderful thing to be a part of as well. Let's see, next slide. So the work of the Cultural Conservancy, these are the three main places that we are. As I was saying before, our first home base is there, started there over 35 years ago in San Francisco, where our main offices are. They're in the Presidio, and that is what we now call Yalamu. And that is that first dot you see right there in the bottom part of that, it's kind of central part of that circle. As Tori mentioned, about a decade ago, we were invited to become a partner up at the teaching farm in Indian Valley Organic Farm and Garden in Novato. This is the organic teaching farm that's associated with the College of Marin. It's right there. If you go up and get off on Ignacio Valley Road, hang a left and hit that Indian Valley College campus, head all the way back to the backmost parking lot where they've got the soccer field. And there's a beautiful small community organic farm there. And a little over a decade ago, we were asked to become a partner there and to hold some beginning relationship of the first peoples of that space and bring some Indigenous sciences to the voice there. Specifically some Indigenous agricultural work, and that is really some of the deep rootings of our foodways work, our native foodways work at the Cultural Conservancy. After that land base that you see that second dot there, if you kind of keep going north or kind of keep going up on the slide as you were, you hit that third dot, that's Heron Shadow. That's our newest land base. The Cultural Conservancy over the last 3 to 4 years has gone through a land return project. This is such an important social moment in time, a social movement and social justice moment in time, and land back has become a leading cry in the world in the last kind of 5-10 years. We've seen it elevate more and more. And it's been an extraordinary honor to walk through one of those projects here in the Bay Area, in a place where land and access to land is unheard of. And what it means to have that access back, and to work with not just individuals who are returning land, but community whose land you're representing and supporting and developing, to bring all of those voices into a relationship and to walk through that process has been one that has just been exceptional, and one we intend to very much learn from and try and share that learning with community. And so because we walk that wide scope, we really walk into this understanding as an intertribal organization, right? An organization that has Indigenous peoples of many tribes within it. I'm Yaqui. One of my beautiful coworkers is Kiowa. Another coworker who's Blackfeet, another who's Quapaw, Shawnee, who's representing many tribes here. We are an intertribal organization, and yet we're located in San Francisco, and we work in land bases across Marin and Sonoma County. So as a Native-led organization that's working in deep relationship to ancestral land and ancestral people, we recognize that our first commitment is to the first peoples of this place. So we say, when we're working in our work, first we prioritize the voice of the California Native people upon whose lands we stand. And then we radiate out in that circle, because we know that as part of the circle and reality of Indigenous people in the Americas, we can't get away from forced relocation or the DUoC Act. We can't get away from those realities that had people leave their traditional territories and head towards city centers. In the San Francisco Bay Area and Oakland Bay Area is one of those largest city centers in the nation that many of those intertribal people were relocated into. And so we recognize that when we are walking around the streets of this area, that we're not walking around and seeing only the Indigenous folks that were first here in this relationship, but the Indigenous folks who showed up here, oftentimes not of their own volition, not of their own choice, and separated from their stories, their lands, their capacity to re-engage. And that's the second circle that we're here to support, to serve, and to support, and to hopefully support their reconnections. And so when we say that we serve the ancestral lands of the Ramaytush, the Lihan, the Chochenyo Ohlone, the Coast Miwok, Southern Pomo people, and other diverse peoples of this circle of the intertribal region, or of the California Native region of the Bay Area, the next circle that we support is that intertribal community, from the Navajo to the Mayan, from the Yaqui to the Kiowa. We have those relationships in our hearts and our minds and in our service. And one of the places that predominantly shows up for us is in relationship to land, where Indigenous folks historically, is true here, especially in California, but of the world over, getting access to land, waters, clean traditional spaces to enact your food traditions, to enact your land traditions as part of your cultural resiliency, as part of your own individual health and resiliency, is what we aim to do. We also work internationally. We have a small re-granting program and other program support services where we work on that larger scale. We try to walk our talk. As an Indigenous organization, we're trying to serve everywhere we can. And so you see dots there kind of across Turtle Island and the Pacific, our Moana, this beautiful kind of heart side of our turtle that kind of goes out into that realm and world. We have projects on the ground in all of those spaces.
Sarah, can you make the
Is my share not working? Let me go back to this share.
Yeah, I think you need to go into the present mode.
Again, did I unpresent here?
No, actually in your, there you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Back to present mode. All right. So why do I keep talking about land? This is a big deal. And it's a big deal right now. Like I said, we're in this very unique social justice movement. I gotta say, for Indigenous folks, time is long. And we see social justice movements or the elevation of Indigenous voices that kind of come and go over time more than once. It's a cycle, isn't it? The world is this beautiful ecosystem of natural cycles that go like this. And right now we are in one of these that is up. It is elevating the voice of Indigenous people. It's elevating this BIPOC moment where we're standing up and we're saying, hey, there's knowledge systems to be had here. There's voices to rise. And one of those moments, like we've been talking about, is very much deeply rooted in land. Leroy Little Bear is a Blackfoot elder. He is a part of the return of buffalo. I don't know if you guys know, but you should, because you're in the San Francisco Bay Area. But historically, buffalo range included all the way to here. And a little over a decade or so ago, they discovered that the original buffalo range, the buffalo herds that they had thought had been lost to massive devastation and slaughter as part of the program to disenfranchise and do away with the savage Indian across the plains, they thought buffalo were gone and extinct. And it turns out that a small part of that original herd, that original genetic bloodline, was being held on a little island up in Canada. And those original buffalo were being tended by the first people who loved them in their creation stories, and the first folks that brought them back. And as part of that, they started to work with reopening the Indigenous lands and roaming territories, quickly following Standing Rock. You guys can look it up. There's also the URL right there at the very bottom of this slide, buffalotreaty.com. Once they opened up those ranges between the United States and Canada that was really held by the Blackfeet Nation, that is a borderland tribe between those places. They also worked with zoos down in the lower 48, 40, however many we are states. I should know that. I'm a college educated human. They brought those buffalo herds down here. And they went into various spaces, in one of the ecological restorative programs that was able to receive some of those original buffalo is Oakland Zoo. And Oakland Zoo brought 14 female buffalo from the original herd in the middle of the night, about 3-4 years ago, and brought them in. And Leroy Little Bear and Amethyst First Rider, who are elders that were part of that group, brought them in. And my husband and I and a number of folks from community were there to welcome them and to arrival for their re-entry back into the Bay Area. And as part of that, there was such deep recognition, right? There's this moment when they opened the pen and the buffalo got to run into their new space for the first time. And Leroy was able to stand there and to sing to them. And the community was there to welcome that relationship and to acknowledge it, and to promise to continue to tend it. And in so doing, Leroy reminded us that we find our cultural resilience in the medicine in the land. It is what is born of those relationships, right? That buffalo story is just one of many. Where do we find that connection, and how do we elevate that connection as cultural people? How does that inform us? How does it inform how we engage, how we learn, how we share, how we enter the world? And it is that reconnection to land that we begin to see the beginnings of many of those revitalization stories take place. So this is our land. This is Heron's Shadow. Leroy came to the land. He gave us blessings. He gave us teachings, many other elders from the community. This land is located in Sonoma County. We immediately contacted the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria, who are the locally federally recognized tribe of that region. And we said, we've been contacted by an individual person who wants to give us land. And you're the ancestral people of this place. We would like to bow out of the way and get you connected so that you can go through this yourselves. And we would be happy to support it any way we know how. And the most extraordinary thing happened. They came out. We were in ceremony on the land with each other. And the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria looked at us and said, we have our hands full. We have many projects going on. Please accept it. You have our permission. And we went through protocol, and it took like 4 years, maybe even 5 from beginning to end. But over the course of that time, we weren't in a hurry. We gave ourselves permission to walk through that journey the best way we knew how. And in the end, what arose there is pretty exceptional, because right as we were taking over and getting in and getting access to that place, the world shut down. A pandemic happened. And it was extraordinary, because normally as an organization, you're busy with community, you're out there, you're doing events, you're doing work, you've got all these things happening. But then when you can't do that, you can get really focused. And we got really focused on the land. That picture you see on the bottom was December of 2019, December of 2020, where we walked through our first cultural burn. Where in Sonoma County, California, for the last 5 years, fire is a dominating conversation of the landscape. How do we deal with fire season? Well, California is a fire ecology. It's one the Indigenous peoples of California have known since the beginnings of their time. Fire has been a constant part of their understanding of their relationship with the land. And so what can happen if we elevate that Indigenous science back and try and model its behavior and then make that available to a larger system and network across California in a modern context? We should try, right? See what happens. Or where you see in this bottom right-hand corner, Maya, our lead farmer, young Quapaw woman, standing there having a conversation with a local California Native person who is visiting, talking about what it means to do dry farming rather than irrigated farming techniques. Because right now we're in a climate crisis. And if we are going to create sustainable models for food production, we need to go back and look at the small family and community farms that are willing to dig into their old sciences like dry farming techniques to address climate change, to address food systems and food production systems, even in an urban landscape. Where in the time of a pandemic, with the food that we were able to grow and the farms we were able to network with, the Cultural Conservancy was able to donate over 5,000 pounds of food out in 2020. When community, in San Francisco, in Oakland, and Santa Rosa, and all these folks can't necessarily get access to clean, healthy food, even in a non-pandemic time. And then in a pandemic time, see that severely diminished down to food boxes that have like canned peaches and dried rice. Not that we disagree with food when it's given to us, but what does it mean to be able to supplement that food with clean, locally grown, fresh produce that's actually culturally bound to your ancestral stories, that can not only feed you around the table, but allow you to sit down with your auntie or your mom or your dad or your cousin and talk about what it means to have a story connected to the corn. Or remember what, hey dad, what did we call that in our traditional language? One word can be the revitalization of a language project in the house. So those are the systems that we're working to truck into. That's Heron Shadow from the Sky. There she is. She's that large, beautiful rectangle there on the left from the tip to tip. And while those gorgeous grasses that you see on the right side are really pretty, those are dandelion flowers and radish flowers, they were invasive grasses. They weren't traditional landscape. And so the reason we made the decision to do fire ecology here was to try and find a way to address that fuel load that didn't include like weed whacking and wood chipping and just redistributing a fuel load that's already there into some new form. Right? We sat down with our circles of elders and we said, okay, let's marry that tech. Let's do tech. We're going to marry technology, modern technology with traditional ecological sciences. And we sat down in the fields and we said, okay, well, permaculture design and mapping design and Google earthing and all kinds of things. What can we do to revitalize those systems? And then we went through that work. And then we sat down and said, okay, now that we have that kind of figured out, what other knowledge systems matter to us in our other tech, our traditional ecological knowledge systems? How can we marry technology and traditional ecological knowledge to get to a relevant today current land project? Well, we said, well, let's take the map and let's look at wildlife corridors. Where do our furry friends run? Where's the water flowing in the season? Where is the watershed restoration project that we need to do? We sat for our first massive storm a couple of weeks ago. You know, that massive atmospheric river we just had? Guess what? We went hiking out there for the last week and have been watching that. Turns out right down there where you see that little tiny green X, or that little green, well, that's a waterhead. We didn't know. We have a bubbling up aquifer. We are the head of a creek water system there that is connected to the Atascadero Creek through the middle of downtown Grayton, that heads out to the Russian River system, that is a part of a coho salmon restoration. We could potentially do a water and ecological riparian zone restoration project all the way up into where we are on this little farm in the middle of Sonoma and be affecting a whole larger ecological restoration project. I find that exciting. So what does that mean, guys? Land. We're always going back to the land. Look at these beautiful ladies. Jeanette Armstrong. I imagine you guys are reading about Jeanette Armstrong if you're taking a class with Chase Clow, for example, or maybe David Escobar if he's still there. There's folks that talk about our amazing Jeanette Armstrong, as well as our beautiful Robin Wall Kimmerer. These are amazing women, and their works in Land Speaking. Jeanette, this is a quote from Land Speaking, and Robin's work in the new traditional ecological knowledge anthology that was put together, the Learning from Indigenous Practices for Environmental Sustainability, that was edited by Melissa Nelson. Really, you know, it's magic, right? When we can put someone on land and say, hey, did you know? There's an echo there, there's a relationship there. And that can be a very informative echo and relationship. This is the remembering of our concentric ecology. We are together part of it, right? We have this unusual perspective right now about the natural world. We're somehow separated from it. We go into our houses at night and we turn on electricity when the light goes to sleep. It's like we're all constantly overriding. Go into our temperature, climate controlled cars when it's too hot outside. Or we go to Google when we need to find information, like it's going to rain tomorrow, right? So this is our new world. Our new world is somehow very much separated from that outdoor world. But we don't necessarily traditionally have to be. Sometimes our aunties and our uncles took a hike and came back that day and they're like, rain's coming, I can taste it in the air. Or, hey, you know, it's the spring solstice, it's time to open up our planting ceremony. because the world is ready for us to plant our corn or plant our foods. Or, hey, it's harvest time. And we know that because the weather changed outside, right? Not away from that natural ecology, but within that natural ecology. And this is what some of our work looks like when we're hanging out in community. That ceremony I was talking about with Great Rancheria, where we sat there and we said, on this land, this is actually your place. What do we do here? We sang songs together. We shared stories together, and we came to our knowing together through that relationship. We've made foods together, well, acorn bites or fresh mushroom bites that come from that land. We've grown foods together like strawberries and talked about strawberry stories and strawberry festivals and why those moments are important in many people's ancestral histories and stories. That's a tule canoe. You guys are in tule territory. There's tule patches that are fun and they float. And tule dolls. You can make little tule dolls and give them to your munchkins to play with. Speaking of munchkins, I was sitting in a beautiful circle with some of those gentlemen from the Coast Miwok Alliance of Marin Council folks, Dean Hoagland and Sky and Joe, and some of those folks that have been a part of the circles and the voices that are helping to inform Dominican University these days. And they were talking about the relationship of oak trees here, the relationship that even on your campus with the very old oak trees that are available to you to walk and see, that those were familial relationships. They were part of your family, those life-giving, sustaining, ecological circles. Oak trees were members of families. And they were in a relationship with those families where an oak tree made a pact and said, I will give because I know you'll give back to me. You'll tend this landscape. You'll tend me as a tree. And you'll allow that relationship to be in a beautiful concentric kind of space. And those knowledge systems and those tending hands will give birth to much. And as it has done, has given birth to people and sustained us and educated us and nourished us. In the modern landscape, there's a lot of ways to step into that. And one of the ways that we step into that is through media. It's really important to talk about media, I think, in the Indigenous landscape, especially in the academy. Because we've been documenting Indigenous folks as a thing of the past or as things to be researched or as, ancient. And yet we're not, right? Here, hi, I'm alive, I'm today, it's 21st century, I have plumbing, it's this kind of modern moment. And we're always in this balance, this kind of duality. And so how do we work in a modern context to kind of reclaim some of those spaces or to address some of those conversations? And we have to face it, historically, documenting Indigenous people, mapping Indigenous people, capturing them on camera, recording their voices. These are technologies that, for the most part, have historically damaged and hurt Indigenous communities. And we can't get away from that reality. Much like we are stepping into our healing system through land acknowledgements and finding good words, we need to find good ways to engage with modern technology now to also foster continual healing. And one of the ways we can do that is by making media and by mapping communities and working with communities in ways that elevate their voices, not for them, but with them, right? How do we respectfully, in good protocol, record an elder sharing language? Or record an auntie doing a tule teaching or a corn teaching? and then work with that community to decide, is that available for public or should that only be available for family? And if it's available for public, how do we decide to share it? Is it okay to put it up on Google Maps immediately? And if not, why? And if so, why? And these are all really important questions that we need to continue to ask ourselves, especially now, especially as media and technology and everything at the tips of your finger tippity tappities can go, right? What is our responsibility to pull back, to slow down, to find the voice, to respectfully enter into that knowledge system, and then to honor it appropriately? When we do, we see a lot of magic in the world. Some deep seed saving and seed rematriation work, land rematriation work, nourishing food, nourishing community, nourishing people. This is really what we're aiming to do. And so that's at the core of the systems of work that I feel really honored to be a part of. This is up there just because it's always up there, but you are welcome to call me, write me, email me. If you want to hear cool stories of these folks, I invite you to go to the Seed Pod. The Native Seed Pod is a podcast that we've created where you can go and listen to these people telling stories and share. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'll drop that link right into our chat so that you guys can have that there too. Okay. But essentially that's like the official part of sharing stories. And in the worlds of my beautiful elder Greg, who I adore and love, you know, he said it's really important that folks always know and that we always remember to remind folks that really we're just one voice. I don't intend to ever show up here to talk for all Indigenous people or Native American people or even Yaqui people or mixed breed people or anything. I'm here to simply share a bit of my story and my experience and share some of what I know, hopefully in the best way I can. And really, you know, recognize and hope that the intentions of everyone else are in the same space. Greg has constantly reminded me, Sarah, there's no bad questions, but there are bad intentions. So what I will say is Greg has always challenged me at the end for a Q&A session. I'm going to open it up to ask a Native a question. There's no bad questions. There's no wrong questions, but there are bad or wrong intentions. So as long as everyone's got good intentions and a good heart, we can have a conversation about pretty much anything. I am of the open and love brigade people. Thank you, Dominican, for helping support that part of me. I just like to hang out and have good conversations. So we can hopefully do that part down too.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a beautiful talk. So we'll invite questions now. If people want to do the raise hand thing, they'll put you on the top of the queue. And then we could take turns that way. Stephanie, please.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful. And I think we all have wheels spinning at this point. I have a question in the land back movement. What does access mean? And I'm asking that because I think that, you know, in all of these centuries, right, of colonial occupation, proprietorship, fencing, dislocation, access, because that's the mindset, this could very easily translate into ownership. And I'm wondering if that is necessarily the case or if there are different conceptions of what access means in the Cultural Conservancy work that you do.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. And I think the best way to answer that question is you have to understand kind of the rules of the road for the territory you're working in, because it changes. It changes everywhere you go. right? And California has this really unique problem. Yeah, sorry, you never want to get into like a who got it worse kind of a battle, but California is really, this is, you know, you throw regular, you know, colonialism on top of this, and then you add the mission system, and then you add right on top of that the gold rush, and then, you know, it's, you have an extensive history of kind of decimation and real loss of what is needed for an indigenous group or tribal group to be federally recognized, to be accepted, to say that they are who they are. You know, there's a lot of boxes you've got to tick to go through that kind of federal recognition process, and one of those big boxes you got to tick is language. Well, you know, post mission gold rush colonialism in California, and you've got languages that are pretty dormant and long dormant. And so you have here an entire system of people who have no chance at recognition, zero. And so you see things like nonprofits arise or tribal groups arise that are looking at the other legal ways to get access, recognition, support, acknowledgement. I mean, everybody's getting creative, right? Try how you can, okay? Now, once you get to that space, or if you're just like a family and you're trying to get to that space, one of the things that comes with the recognition journey is also an awareness of your tribal territories. Now that takes you into the mapping conversation. And really, what's mapping? Somebody walked on the ground and drew a line. Who drew that line, guys? It wasn't Indigenous people. I'm going to tell you right now, there was no such thing as my land stops here and your land starts there. It is a very modern concept, okay? It's not how it works. You're working in migrational seasonal territories and ever-shifting watersheds and ever-changing fire ecologies. People moved, and people moved because they had to move. And everybody was collectively aware of that because you're a part of the same ecosystem. So access is only now, okay? It is only a current modern problem. And it's a current modern problem because somebody walked around and said, here. And then everybody believed that person. I don't know who those people are, but they were really powerful people, right? And they made some pretty serious decisions that are like echoing all the way to today. Okay, so now you're today and you're a member of the California Basket Weavers Association in California. You're a tribal auntie, and the only places that you can get to tend to get gathering places are the public access places you can get to. Where are public access places now, guys? Freeways, you know, like the dump site over at Hamilton that they abandoned. Where's public access? There aren't. Okay, so now I'm a modern California basket weaver and I'm sick because for the last 20 years, the only place I can get to tending to get to my gathering spots are places with really bad runoff from freeway and like post cleanup PG&E sites and all this stuff. And like, it's bad. And now I have health issues related to wanting to do my cultural practice. So now access to the Cultural Conservancy means modern context. I need safe. I need clean. I need healthy. And I need nobody gonna fence you or run you off their land and say you're on candid camera, get off my place, right? Access means all of those things. If I want to nourish community for the California Basket Weavers Association. And that's not just for one kind of access. California Basket Weavers Association works with many materials, right? Willow, tule, sedge, dogbane, Tori will have a much more comprehensive list of that, right? But you've got this. That's not one site. That's the region of Northern California. So now add that to my list. Now I've got regional access. Now, where do I find most of those big open spaces in this day and age? National Park Service. Who has the biggest relationship with National Park Service? Ranchers. Because they need a place to make their cows eat and roam. Guess who's getting priority to those access places? So now you're adding relationship management, right? And government services, because National Park Service is government entities. Now there's also local groups who want to help, like Sonoma Open Space and Ag. They're fabulous. They're out there trying to work against commercial development and maintain open spaces in Sonoma that will not fall to, you know, big commercial, terrible cultivation nests, right? They're out there trying to protect land. And they're willing to come in and say, hey, we'll partner with you as long as we can put a conservation easement on that land. Fabulous. I like the idea of a conservation easement. I think that's great. But what does that mean to my access again? Because now you guys are partnered. Wait, do I have to, every time I want to go tend my dog bane, do I have to call you? How does that work? Now I have multiple, now local, state, and federal agency tending. This is our web. It's very complex. And that's just California. Go to Southern Arizona, where Yaqui people, my tribal people, my husband is from Pascua. His people come from Pascua. We're both Yaqui. But down at Pascua, you're working also in a Borderlands situation where the United States federally recognized tribe is just outside of Tucson, but the original villages are south of the border along the Rio Yaqui in northern Mexico, along the Sonoran Desert region. Again, back to mapping. Before somebody decided to draw a line for Mexico and the United States, that was our traditional territory. We're the Sonoran Desert folks, right? Somebody drew a line, 2 full state government things, whole international entity right through our traditional territory. It's fabulous. So we get to play with the US government and the Mexican government just to boot. That's really fun. Now my access means 2 governments. It just rolls. This is why having land of your own matters, right? So 2020 started, and here we go. We're just getting the land at Heron Shadow up and running. We're still working on cleaning it out, but we have all of our plant inventory up at Indian Valley Organic Farm and Garden, because that's where we have historically been working on our seed storage and our, like, for the last 6-7 years, like that's been our spot, right? Lockdown happened, shutdown happened. Everybody shut down, including College of Marin. Now, College of Marin said, no access, 0, right? Beginning of lockdown, everybody did it. We're not trying to point fingers anywhere, but we were a partner and we're like, yeah, but we need to get to the plants. And they're like, no, shut, done, no access, no campus access. We're like, no. We have thousands of plants in inventory that represent hundreds of pounds of food for our community that we need to get in, and we'll just come in and take them. We don't even, like, we won't have to hang out. We don't, like, what can we do to work with you? They're like, no access. Can't get in to even water the plants. Now, it's not their fault, but they own that land. And they could look at us again and say, no, you can't get to those plants. You can't get to that food. You can't get to that seed. That was a big moment. Now, eventually we got to work with them and we got our access, right? We also had a couple people at night in dark guerrilla warfare gear sneaking in through the hills and watering plants through the fence, because we're not going to let our plants die. So, you know, don't tell anybody we did that. But we were trying to do what we could. They're not just food, guys. Those are our relatives. Remember that oak tree? That oak tree that became part of the family? We couldn't just let him go. So now what does it mean to have hair and shadow? Lockdown? It's okay. You can still come see the plants. Right? You can still come tend your relatives and tend your neighbors. Now that is a very modern day moment in time, but that was access. That was an access issue. Molly, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, this might be totally obvious based on what you just said, but is the best case scenario for all of you in terms of reclaiming land to have a private individual just turn over their land to you? And does that ever happen?
I think it happens. I've heard systems like that. I believe Segurite Land Trust, one of their land projects, was also working with an individual. They're over in Oakland. You know, this is, again, it's super situational. I got to tell you, one of my deepest learnings of going through this land back process was not about having to fundraise to get, you know, the land donation. It was a very generous donation. We still had to come up with funds. It was like a 50% off kind of a deal. The person really did from their heart want to donate it 100%, but once they got into their financial reality, again, reality, once they got into their financial reality, once they had the best of intentions of a full donation, they actually financially couldn't afford a full donation. So we had to work along that spectrum and still raise money to do a partial purchase. But what I didn't take into account at that time is what actually means for a small group to now all of a sudden be responsible for a $2 million piece of land. That's like property taxes, insurance, infrastructure support. I had a old farmhouse with like an inch of black mold inside everywhere you looked. I had a barn that was like the leaning tower of barns. You know, there was a lot to do. An old trailer in the corner, I'm pretty sure I just wanted to burn to the ground and not ever go into. It was, you know, I needed the $1 million to buy it, but I need the $1 million to even get it off the ground.
Yeah.
And that's a deep learning, because the best of intention of getting land back is beautiful, but if you don't do it in kind of the right way, it's the kind of gift that could bring a small group to its knees. So there's a larger story of support, and I think each project needs to find its balance with that story of support. And I think that story of support could definitely be from an individual, but I see that potential from a state institution. You know, I know that folks like Post down in the Peninsula, Open Space Land Trust, they own land. They could be doing this with Indigenous tribal groups, right? Same with Sonoma, Marin County, Malt. Like, you actually have folks that could be partnering with Indigenous folks to do it too. So I think there's, yeah, I think it's finding your way with each project.
Good point.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you both for the questions. I want to wrap up the hour and invite everyone to register for the public panel next Thursday. Yeah, and you know, and I encourage you to look up Sarah's organizations and support them. And yeah, if you have further questions for Sarah, maybe contact Sarah directly. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sarah.
And maybe I could say, I know I feel like personally we could sit